Hey everyone, it's Professor Clark. In this lecture, we are going to go over some of the common uses of the dative. Some of these you will already know, and some of these will be new to you, but in either case, this should be a very useful review of how to use the dative. The first use of the dative, and the one that is probably the most familiar to you, is to use it to express age. So when we talk about age, we say to me is X number of years, for example. So whoever's age we're talking about, we put them in the dative, and then we have the number of years. So our question, for example, how old are you, is сколько тебе лет, or сколько вам лет. And then the answer could be мне 20 лет. So notice that we have сколько лет, and then the dative of whosever age we're asking. And in the answer, we have the dative of whosever age we're talking about, and then the number of years. Мне 20 лет. And remember how to count years. So if you have 1 or any number ending in the word 1, like 21, we use год, so 21 год. And then 22, 23, 24 года. And then finally, 25 лет. So this is one of those words where the genitive plural is a different word from the nominative or the genitive singular. And then there are some verbs that take the dative, and some of these you probably already know. So there's нравится or понравится, which is literally something like to be pleasing to someone. And so when we use нравится or понравится, the thing that we like is the subject of the verb, and the person doing the liking or the person who is pleased by this thing is in the dative. So we can say, for instance, мне нравится эта книга. I like this book. Мне нравятся американские фильмы. I like American movies. We're most likely to use this verb in either the third person singular, if we have one item, like мне нравится эта книга, or the third person plural, if we have multiple items, as in мне нравятся американские фильмы. However, because the stress is on the a rather than the e or the ya, the pronunciation is going to be very similar in the two third person forms. You will also see it in other forms occasionally, as in я тебе нравлюсь, you like me, but it's most common in the third person. Another verb that takes the dative is хотеться or захотеться, which is to be wanted, and it's often used with this meaning of to feel like doing something. It's almost always going to be in the third person as well, and in the past tense, it's going to be in the оно form. So we can say, for instance, мне хочется есть. I'm hungry or I feel like eating. Or in the past tense, мне вдруг сильно захотелось есть. I suddenly got really hungry. And then we have the verb приходиться or прийтись, which is literally to come to something, but to have to do something. And it is also normally going to be in the third person singular or the оно form. So we could say, for instance, ему пришлось заплатить еще раз за билет. He had to pay for the ticket again. And it's to have to do something in the sense of you weren't planning to or you didn't want to, but you had to do it. You couldn't get around doing it. So it's not in the sense of you should do something. It's that some obligation suddenly fell upon you and you were unable to avoid doing something. Then we have the construction of something being needed or necessary. And this has two similar but slightly different constructions. If we're talking about an action being needed or necessary, and we're going to use a verb, then we have the dative of the person who needs to do the thing, and then either нужно or надо, both are fine, they're completely interchangeable, plus the infinitive of the verb, as in мне нужно поехать в аэропорт. I need to go to the airport. Нам надо приготовить ужин. We need to make supper. And note the difference between this and, for example, мне пришлось поехать в аэропорт. Мне нужно поехать в аэропорт means I haven't gone yet, I need to go, but I'm not necessarily going to go. I could not go, but I need to go. Or нам надо приготовить ужин. We have not actually prepared supper yet. We need to. We should. We may not, but we do need to. As opposed to мне пришлось поехать в аэропорт. I wasn't planning to go to the airport, but then for some reason I was obliged to go to the airport, and so I did. Or Нам приходится приготовить ужин. We were not planning to make supper. Someone else was supposed to make supper, or we had plans to go to a restaurant or order supper or something like that, but those plans fell through and now we have to make supper. So that's the difference between нужно or надо and приходиться прийтись. And then if we need a thing or some kind of a noun, the noun itself is the subject of the sentence. And then we use the appropriate form of нужно as a short form adjective that matches the subject or the thing that's needed. And then whoever needs the thing is in the dative. So for instance, мне нужен новый учебник. I need a new textbook. And note that учебник, textbook, which is masculine, is the subject of the sentence, even though it's at the end of the sentence. That's fine. It's still the subject. It's the subject. It's in the nominative. Нужен is the masculine form of the short form adjective, and it matches учебник, and then мне is dative. Or ему нужна новая книга. He needs a new book. Again, книга is the subject, it's the nominative, нужна matches it, and then the person who does the needing is in the dative, ему. Note the stress shift. Нужен is stressed on the first syllable, but нужна is stressed on the second syllable. And then if we have neuter, we could say, for instance, ей нужно новое кресло. She needs a new armchair. And кресло, which is neuter, is the subject. It's nominative, and then нужно matches it. It is also a neuter, and then she is in the dative, ей. And we can also have plural things. So, for instance, им нужны новые очки. Очки, glasses, are plural, and they're also the subject, and they're nominative. And so нужны matches that. It is also nominative plural, and then they are doing the needing, so they are in dative, им. Note the stress shift. We have нужен, нужна, нужно, and then the plural can be either нужны or нужны. The stress can be on either syllable in the plural. And then we have a whole series of impersonal adverbial constructions. You can do them with almost any adverb that also use the dative. And some very common ones are можно, permissible, возможно, possible, нельзя, forbidden or impossible, and пора, which is technically a noun, but here it's used like an adverb, and it means it is time. And so we can say things like мне можно, it is permissible for me to do something. Мне возможно, it is possible for me to do something. Мне нельзя, it is forbidden or impossible for me to do something. And мне пора, it is time to do something. Like мне пора домой, it's time for me to go home. And we can use this same construction with many, many, many other adverbs like интересно, like мне интересно, I'm interested, or this is interesting to me. Скучно, as in мне скучно, I'm bored. Мне легко, this is easy for me. Мне трудно, this is hard for me. Мне приятно, this is pleasant for me. Мне неприятно, this is unpleasant for me. We also use this construction to indicate sensations or temperatures, like how you feel. So you can say, мне жарко, I'm hot, or мне холодно, I'm cold. If you used a non-dative construction, if you said something like, я холодна, be like, I'm a cold person, like I'm frigid and unpleasantly cold. But мне холодно means it is cold to me, and it means I feel cold. We also have a series of impersonal negative constructions. So these constructions do not have a subject that also use the dative, and these are made with the particle не. So we already learned things like никуда, никогда, ничего. But this is similar to that, but slightly different. We have не instead of ни, and the stress is on the не. So we have нигде, which means nowhere when indicating location, некуда, nowhere indicating direction, никогда, never or no time, and ничего, nothing. And when we use these words, we do not combine them with ни or не as we would with the regular ни words like никуда. So if we were going to use никуда, for instance, we would have to use it in combination with не and say something like я никуда не иду. I'm not going anywhere. But with некуда, we just use the dative of the person that it refers to and no other не or ни. Let's look at some examples. Мне нечего есть. I have nothing to eat. But we don't say literally, I have nothing to eat. We say мне нечего есть. Мне некогда читать. I have no time to read. Мне негде жить. I have nowhere to live. Мне некуда идти. I have nowhere to go. Note the difference between these forms and the regular negative constructions that have subjects. So if we say, for instance, я ничего не ем, that means I am not eating anything, but мне нечего есть means I have nothing to eat. If we say я никогда не читаю, that means I never read, and there could be many reasons for that. But мне некогда читать means I have no time to read. If we say я нигде не живу, that means I am not living anywhere or I live nowhere. Versus мне негде жить, I have nowhere to live, I'm homeless. And then я никуда не иду, I am not going anywhere, is different from мне некуда идти, I have nowhere to go. And once again, note that we do not use a double negative. We just have this single negative, нечего, некогда, негде, некуда, and the verb itself is in the infinitive. And finally, let's go over some meanings of the preposition på. The preposition på takes the dative most of the time, and it has a large variety of meanings in English. So there's no particular translation that we can give it that will translate all of its meanings from Russian to English. Some common meanings that it has are by or by means of or on. So in Russian, мы говорим по телефону. So говорить по телефону is to talk on the phone or talk by phone. And we can also смотреть по телевизору, which is to watch something on TV. So when we're talking about what device we're using to speak or watch, we were going to use по and then the dative, so по телефону, по телевизору. It also indicates motion around or about, normally with the verb ходить. So ходить по комнате is to walk around the room, to pace the room or to walk in circles around the room. Ходить по городу is to walk around town. And then your textbook also gives an example of ходить по магазинам, to go around the shops or walk around the shops, which means to go visit different shops. So if we have по and then the plural of the dative, that normally means like each or every, and it refers to going to all of them. So ходить по магазинам is to go visit all the shops or to go visit multiple shops. And then you also know, of course, things like по субботам, on Saturdays, and that's kind of a related meaning. And then another common meaning that it has is along or down when you're talking about motion along or down something. So идти по улице is to walk down the street. And notice that if you have a multi-directional verb of motion plus по, it's going to indicate circular motion or motion around something or visiting multiple locations. If you have a unidirectional verb of motion plus the preposition по, that means to walk down or along something, as in идти по улице, to walk down the street. So that is it for our overview of the dative. I hope you found that helpful and enjoy your Russian.